first I feel that I have to apologize for being late. You know, it's Chanukah and we're all busy with family affairs and many different obligations, so I'm sorry for being late, but I'm sure that Kosovo people like you probably didn't have any bittul Torah. So, Baruch Hashem. We are still in the midst of Yom Chanukah, and this night we light the 6th candle, but we are approaching the end of Yom Chanukah, and therefore the topic we will be discussing today, on one hand, is still in Yom Yoma, but it is one of the general sugyas of Yom Yoma of Hilchas Chanukah, a sugya that is not only limited in its scope in Hilchas Chanukah l'kisha atzma, but it goes far beyond the specific halachas of Chanukah. And at least we will start off and finish off today's Shir in Hilchas Chanukah, but between the beginning and the end, we will visit various different destinations and different sites along the way. So in Tov Reish Ayin Aleph, in the beginning of Hilchas Chanukah, when the Mechaber speaks about the most basic halachas of Chanukah, the caption of the Siman, Tov Reish Ayin Aleph, is Seder HaHalachos Chanukah v'mokoim hanochosoi. And on Halacha Beis, the Shulchan Aruch writes, Kamen Nerois Madlik. We find this exact same nusach, same formulation in the Rambam. First, the first perek of Hilchas Chanukah, Halacha Gimel. Second perek of Hilchas Chanukah, Halacha Aleph. Perek Dalet, Hilchas Chanukah, Halacha Aleph. Kamen Nerois Madlik. But unlike the Rambam writes, Mitzvoso, Shir Kol Bayis V'Bayis Madlik Ner Echod. V'mahader es ha-mitzvahs madlik neros k'minyan shebeisoi, v'ha-mahader yeser mezeh madlik neros and moise v'hoylach. So the Rambam brings all three amahader yeser mezeh v'oise mitzvah men ha-mufchar. That's the Lashon of the Rambam. So the Rambam brings all three options. The three options that we find in the basic sugi. Ner shebeisoi, ha-mahader madlikim ner kol echad v'echad ha-mahader min ha-mahader moise v'hoylach. Oh, poiches voilach. Unlike the Rambam, the Torah and the Rambam have a different formulation. And I'm quoting the Shulchan Aruch. Kamen Eros Madlik, B'layla Rishon Madlik Echod, Mekan Ve'elach, Moise V'hoilach Echod B'kol Layla, Anshe B'layla Charon Yiyu Shmoyen Eros. The Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring option number 1 and option number 2. The only possibility is Mahadrim Mina Mahadrim, and why is that? The Gemara gives three different options, 3 different ways. And the Gemara seems to indicate with clarity that it is only a hidu. Mahadrin, el kol echad ve'echad, mahadrin mina, mahadrin moise v'orach. But the Shulchan Aruch asks the basic question, kamen eres madlik, and the only option he gives is moise v'orach. L'chayra, one could suggest one of 2 suggestions to understand why the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch differ from the Rambam, and why do they give the only possibility, which is Mahadar and Mina Mahadar. So many times I apologize in Shiur and I say, if I would have lived 800 years ago, this is what I would say. But I'm fully aware that I did live 800 years ago. Well, obviously I'm here with you today. So I wasn't one of the Rishonim, and it isn't customary for someone today to suggest no pollution that we don't find in Rishonim, but if I would live 800 years ago, I would say that the understanding of the Torah in the Gemara is Mitzvahs Chanukah ner shebeisoi, Mahadrim ner kol echad v'echad, Mahadrim min ha-Mahadrim, that those were 3 different stages. And this mitzvah evolved in a way. Stage number 1, Chachamim shel oisei hador were metaken ner shebeisoi. At some later stage, they felt it is fitting to perform this mitzvah in a more beautiful, in a fuller way, and that is when they accepted the minhag, or maybe it was a tekana, not only a minhag, and then in some later stage, it was moise v'hoilach, and each stage annulled the previous one. So after the tekana was ner kol echad v'echad, it is no longer relevant that once upon a time it was ner shebeisoi. And when they accepted the practice, v'yos moise v'hoilach, it was no longer relevant ner kol echad v'echad or find no remez and no trace of such a pirush in the Shayim. And therefore it is unreasonable. It is unreasonable for an additional reason, because it is very clear and very simple to everyone that if you don't have enough psilas or enough shemen or enough whatever it is, to be Meisav, you still have the basic mitzvah of Meresh Beisoy. More than that, the Mishnah Berurah says, what is the din? If a person has ample shemen and ample neiros, but his friend has nothing, and the Mishnah Berurah paskins, you have to forego on the hidur to be mezaka another person. At least he should be able to perform the basic mitzvah. So obviously, everybody agrees that there still is the halacha of Meresh Beisoy. So why doesn't the Machaber give that possibility? Why does he say the only option we have is Moisel HaHorach? And therefore, I think the way we really have to understand this halacha and the nusach of the two in the Machaber is based on the concept of Kiblu Alayhu Chayv. And to substantiate and to achieve clarity in the musag, in the concept of Kiblu Alayhu Chayv, we will check 8 different sources. The earliest source, and in as such, probably the most basic and important source, is the sugya of Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus. So in Brachas Chavav, there's a machlokes of Ben Gamliel, the Rebbe Yehoshua, and Tfilas Ha'aretz Chayv or Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus. And Abaye v'Rav Nechlaku, halachik eman. Whether the halacha is in accordance to Rav Gamliel Tfilas Ha'aretz Chayv or Rebbe Yehoshua Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus. Abaye says Tfilas Ha'aretz Chayv, Rav says Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus. Obviously, as you all know, whenever in Shas there's a machlokes of Abaye v'Rav, halachik Rav. When Chazal say halachik kibasroi, it is always the kavona halachik Rav. So we pass in Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus. And Tosfos is troubled by 2 very basic kashas and problems in accordance to the halachas Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus, from 2 different halachas that we find in Perek Daled of Masechet Brachos. Shochach v'lo yomar yal v'yovei ba'aretz eino yichayzer u'misparel lefi she'ein mekatchen es hachodesh v'layla. So the only reason he doesn't have to daven once again, if he forgot to say yal v'yovei ba'layla, by Marav, is lefi she'ein mekatchen es hachodesh v'layla. So it's quite obvious if he made a different mistake, not regarding Yalav Yovah. He forgot one of the brachas. He forgot one of the Yud Ches brachas. Of course, he has to daven again. Why? Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus. If it's not a chayvo, how could there be a chiyuv lachzor v'lehisparo if it wasn't a chayv in the first place? The second kasha Tosfos asks, shochach v'lo hisparo l'arvis. He has to daven tashlumin twice by shachas. How could there be tishlumin if it's not a chayv at all? If it's a rishus, how could there be tishlumin? Those are the 2 questions Tosfos asks. And Tosfos twice in the Masechet Brachos. Daf Chovav and Daf Lamed. And once again Daf Daled 3 times in the Masechet Brachos. Tosfos says, when Chazal say Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus, they don't mean mamish rishus. It's not a choyv gemura like shachos and mincha. What would be the difference? Various differences. Tosfos says the difference would be if there's a mitzvah veres, if he has another mitzvah to perform, and that other mitzvah is obligatory. It's not a rishus. So if Tfilas Ha'aretz Chayva, Tfilas Ha'aretz comes before any other mitzvah. But if Tfilas Ha'aretz Rishus, another mitzvah, which is a mitzvah veres, overrides Tfilas Ha'aretz. Aval ein levatlo b'chinam. That is the basic argument of Tosfos. Ein levatlo b'chinam. It's not really a rishus in the classical sense. It's a rishus in comparison to shachas and mincha. It is not a choyv gemur like shachas and mincha, but still it's not mamish rishus. And therefore, it does have tashlumin. And therefore, you are required to daven mal. So if you got the Yalav you don't have to daven again because then if you made another mistake, you have to daven once again because rishus doesn't mean it's mamish rishus. That's one teretz that the Tosfos quotes from Dalchos Gedolos. It is interesting that in Masechet Brachos Tosfos brings no other yishuv, no other teretz, but 2 other sources in Shas Tosfos brings another opinion, and that is in Yom Beis Einam Beis and in Chagiget Avtesan Beis. And these 2 sources Tosfos quotes the Halachos Gedolos. Tfilas Arvis L'Shus, Daven Kiblu Aleinu Chayv. And in various different places in the place when we find the concept Kiblu Aleinu Chayv. Even though by pure halachic definition it's a L'Shus and not a Chayv. But there is a halachic concept that people can take upon themselves a L'Shus and it becomes a Chayv. One could take upon himself an obligation, and that obligation is binding, and it has essence and significance, and it becomes as if a Chayv. However, the concept of Kibbul Aleinu Chayv is Shnei Dinim. It is not very common that I say Shnei Dinim, but in this halach it's quite clear. Could I have, please, a Brachas Gemara? I don't like to be Matzviach, but I need a Brachas Gemara with the Rif. So what Rav Waldman asks, you always go too fast, my dear friend. You ask whether the Chayv is Medineda. Maybe it is Medineda, maybe not, as will become clear in the next few minutes in the Shia. So there is a personal concept of Kibbul Olav Chayv, and there is a general concept of Kibbul Olav Chayv. Two different ideas. One idea is on the personal basis. And what Tosfos quotes from Halachas Gedolos is, Tfilas Arvis might be Rishus. But if you daven the Mariv, that means you took it upon yourself. And therefore, if you davened once, if you didn't daven in a valid manner, and your tefillah was not a proper tefillah, you need to daven again. So if you wouldn't choose to daven at all, that would be okay. But if you did daven, that means you took it upon yourself to daven, and therefore, if you skip the bracha, you need to re-daven. So that is the way Tosfos explains, Shokach al V'yavoy doesn't have to re-daven because they're in Katzon's Chosh B'Laylo. It would be another mistake, you would have to daven again. But we still have a problem with Shokach V'lo Yispalel Arvis, he has to daven Teshlumin. Well, if he did that once, why does he need to be mashlim? So Tosfos argues, but maybe the fact that he davened yesterday, and the day before yesterday, and the day that came before the day before yesterday, that in itself is also Kibbul Olav Chayv. And therefore, if he davens every night, and he skipped one night, he would need to daven once again, because the fact that he davened all the other nights means that he took it upon himself to daven, and that Kabbalah is buying. Both concepts, or rather both faces or both sides of the same coin, are personal Kibbul Olav Chayv. The fact that you davened tonight, the fact that you davened yesterday night is a personal Kibbul Olav Chayv. And therefore, if you forgot, or you skip the bracha, you need to re-daven. The other concept of Kibbul Olav Chayv is a general one, not the individual, but the tzibur, the cloud, the minig, that also could transform a reshus into a chayv. So concept number one is quoted twice in Tosfos, twice in Shas Yuma, Peizayin, Chigi, Gedaftes, in the name of Halachos Gedolos. Where do we first find concept number two, the general Kibbul Olav Chayv, the collective Kibbul Olav Chayv, not the personal one? Both concepts are found in the Rif, in the same sugya, in the sugya of Tfilas Arvis Rishus. So what I have right here before me is a modern Gemara. And when I say a modern Gemara, I don't necessarily mean Steinsaltz, I mean Oizvahoda. To me, it is a modern Gemara, because the Dafim aren't the same as the Shas I've been learning for the past 50 years. So in the old Vilna Shas is stuff, you test on the Dafim and the Dafim of the Rif, and in the Shas which I have right here before me, it seems to be Dafim Memtes and the Dafim of the Rif. But nevertheless, I will be quoting the Lashon of the Rif. Bereish Perik Dalet Shel Masechet Brachos. The Rif brings the Machlokes in Gemara, whether Tfilas Arvis is Rishus or Tfilas Arvis is Chayva. Kaiman da Lochik Rava, Tfilas Arvis Rishus, Mil, Haim in a Hechadalit Zorale Klau. Avalecha de tzorel elet v'resaris kol shav yalei chayvo. V'itoi, and if they made a mistake, order l'reish. This is exactly, precisely what Tosis quotes in the name of the Bahag. The fact that you daven once means you took it upon yourself to daven, and therefore, Rishus becomes chayvo. And therefore, if you skip the bracha, you need to re-daven. And then, 3 lines later, the Rif once again says, Tov lo yispalal arvis, mispalal shachar shtayim, v'hu divrei hakol, lekeman de paleg alei, v'afilu leman de omer rishus, choy v'hu de leise, aval mitzvah is. And that is the teretz of the Ri. The Tosis brings twice or 3 times in brachos. Then he goes on and he says, v'hu idno, in our times, nohu alma l'shavye kechoivo. That is concept number 2. Besides a personal kibbutz of by the fact that you daven once, and therefore you need to daven again, v'hu idna, nohu alma l'shavye kechoivo. And that is also what we find in the Rambam, first Perek of Hilchos Tefillah, Halacha Vav. The Rambam writes, after Pishat Tefillah Shabbos Hashis. In our days, the minig is that everybody davens manav, and therefore kiblu alayu chayvu. So in this basic sugya, Tefillah Shabbos Hashis or Tefillah Shabbos Chayvu, we find both different definitions, both different concepts of kiblu alayu chayvu. The personal one, the individual one, and the communal. The public and the general kibul alaya chayvu mitzad minad klal yisrael. Source number 2, and we still are in Hilchos Chanukah. What is the din if you skipped Al Nisim in Shmoyne Esrei? Tov Reish Pei Beis v'divrei haTur. The Tur says if you skipped Al Nisim, you don't have to re-daven. It's lachatchila, it's not miyakev, because Chanukah is only midrabanon, different than Shol Shegolim. If you missed Yalav Yaloi, you need to redaven. But because Chanukah is only midrabanon, and therefore Al-Nisim is not miyakev, and if you skipped Al-Nisim, whether in Berachos Hamazon or in davening, you do not have to redaven. However, the Beis Yosef brings 2 sources. The Beis Yosef says yes, the ruling of the Tur is based on Tosis, the Rosh, and some other Rishonim. But the Ravyo, Hilchos Megillah Siman Kuf Samach Yom, and the Mordechai Siman Reish Ayin Tes, they maintain that because everybody says Al Nisim and Tefillah Kibul Chayvo, and it is Kemot V'Nesaris Hashus, even though the original Rochos V'Nesaris Hashus, but Kibul Chayvo. And Bekitzur Rishoinoi Shel Beis Yosef, which is actually the Lashon of the Ravyo, he says, well, he davened, and he intended to say Al Nisim, he just forgot, and therefore Kibul Chayvo. But he also emphasizes no almo. So when these Rishonim maintain, if you skip Al Nisim, you need to re-daven. Daven once again. They mention the 2 different ideas of Kibbutz Al-Chayv, the personal one and the general. So this is source number 2. Source number 3 takes us far away from Chanukah. Kuf Peiches, Shalashulis. If you skip the Ratzei and Shalashulis. The end of Siman Kuf Peiches, the Tur brings from his brother. The Tur had several great brothers who were sages of their time. Oki Rabbeinu Yechiel, Misufak, if you skipped, let's say, in Berachos Hamazon Shalashulis, whether you have to bench once again. What is the question? The question is it a basic halachic requirement to eat pas by Shalashulis? So the Torah says, according to the Menutam, that you use Shalashulis with pears, or with cake, with mizonis, then Berachos Hamazon is not mandatory, and therefore it's you don't have to bench once again. That is a Gemon Brochas Memtes, the Shchodesh. If you skip the Alav Yovi, you don't have to bench once again because it's not a chiyuv to eat a Suda of Pas on Shchodesh. The same would apply to Shalashudis. But according to some other Rishonim that maintain that you need to eat Pas on Shalashudis, and therefore, if you skip the Alav Yovi, you need to bench again. The Beis Yosef brings Hagoes Maimonides. Based on the Ravyo I just quoted 2 minutes ago regarding Alanisim in Chanukah, that because the custom is, the minig is that everybody does wash on Shalashudis, Kibel Aleihem Chayvo, and therefore, if you skip to the say, you have to bench once again. So that is the opinion that Beis Yosef quotes from Hagoes Maimonides, and that is based on the same argument, the same idea, the same source, the Ravyo regarding skipping Alanissim, Chanukah, in your David. So that would be source number 3. And from Hilchas Berachas HaMazon, we go to Siman Tov Kuf Tzaddik Aleph, which is Hilchas Tfilas Rosh Hashanah. The Mechaber brings that you need to say Asora Psuka Malchis, Asura Pulim Zechonis, and Shoifras. And the Ramah says that is only the Chetchela. But if you said one Posek Yotzi Yedechavosa, you need to say a Posek and the Brocha Malchis, Zechonis, Shoifras, and it was Yotzeh. And the Mogan Avraham Siv Kotten Vov, the Siman Tov Kuf Tzaddik Aleph says, because it is the minig everywhere to say Asora Psukim Kiblu Aleim Chayvo, and he wasn't Yotzei Dechavose, and he has to say once again the brachas of Malchis, Zechor, and Shoifras. That is the opinion of the Mogan Avraham, based on the general idea of Kibel Alay Chayv. So we call it two Beis Yosefs in 2 different sugyas, in the name of different Rishonim. Alanissim, and let's say the Shalashudis. The Mogan Avraham B'Malchi is Zechor and Shoifras, and now we go over to Mogan Avraham number 2, Siman Tov Peites, and Dinei Sfias Hoim, and Steve Kotnal, which is a surprise. A surprise and also a controversy. So the Mogan Avraham and Siman Tov Peites, the beginning of the Siman, Steve Kotnal says, Noshim, women are exempt from the Mitzvah of Sfias Hoim, because it's a Mitzvah Sesei Man Grom. Noshim have no chiyuv in all the mitzvahs to say Shas Mangrove. However, Kiblu Aleihem Chayv, which is a big chiddush. And why is it a big chiddush? Because generally we know that most Ashkenazi Jews accept the rulings of the Mogan Avraham. The Mogan Avraham is the Rosh Medaber and Shulchan Aruch HaChaim, the Bnei Ashkenaz. But I am not aware of any kehillah b'Beis Yisrael in which it was a major payda that Noshim should say Sfias Hoim. I think it is only in our generation, in the Beis Yaakov Chinuch, that girls and women say Sfias Hoim. What we call in the Alta Haim, nobody was makar. Neither in Germany, in Ashkenaz, definitely not in Poland. And I don't think there was any kehillah b'Beis Yisrael 100 years ago in which women said Sfias Hoim. The Mishnah Brura contemplates, and he brings from Samachim, he says it's not kedai that Noshim should start saying Sfias Hoim with the bracha. First, they don't understand what they're saying. Today, that would be a questionable assumption. Sometimes, and I'm not very happy about this, but sometimes they know the halachas better than their husbands, and I know of many a young couple, and the husband wants to know Hilchos Shabbos, he asks his wife, because in yeshiva he learned 4 blatten bava metzia, 3 blatten bava kamen, some of Shimon's and some of Cholins, but when he wants to know Hilchos Nefilas Yadayim, he consults his wife. So now we're trying to say that Noshim don't understand what they're saying. No, that is not a reasonable argument. And the other reason that Moshe Bru brings, because, well, they'll probably forget somewhere along the way, which is a problem sometimes, because most men, if you go to a minyan and you daven Marav in shul, then you're going to hear Sfias Hoim every night, but women don't go to a minyan, and most of them don't daven Marav. Even the frum ones that do daven Shachas and Mincha, they don't daven Marav. So it is quite common for women somewhere along the way to forget. However, the Mogan Avraham maintains Kibul Alayim Chayvo, and that is a surprise, because no Kehillah Bebeis Yisrael of the Ashkenazi Yudentum had the meaning of Noshim being mapped in the Sfias Hoim, but that's what the Mogan Avraham argues. And 2 major Achronim. The Minchas Chanukah mitzvah Shinvov, that is the mitzvah of Svias Woimer in the minyan of Sefer Chinuch, and Naziris Shimshon. Naziris Shimshon is not a very famous sefer, but it's one of the important sforim in Shulchan Aruch HaChaim. And they both dispute the svara of Kiblu Aleim Choyve, and they have a very interesting argument. And they say the concept of Kiblu Aleim Choyve is only valid when there's a machlokes, when there are different opinions. For instance, the basic source. I said before, what is the first source of Kibru Aleim Choyve? Tfilas Adas Shus or Tfilas Adas Choyve? That's a machlokes of Amir Rabbi Yeshua. It's a machlokes of Bayin Rabba. So even though the halacha is Tfilas Adas Shus, a person could take upon himself the opinion that it is actually a Choyve and not a Shus. How many psukim did we have to say Machlas Achon Shoyves? That's a machlokes in the Gemara. So these Achronim argue when there is a machlokes, then it's shaykh to say Kibul Olav Choyve Shalshulis. You have to wash or don't you have to wash? It's shaykh to say Tfilas Adas. You know, we took upon ourselves to be machlo in accordance to the shid that is Choyve, but nobody says that Svias Woimer is a Chiyuv Anoshim, and therefore not shaykh to say Kibul Olav. When I say nobody maintains that Noshim are Chayav and Svias Woimer, well, that is almost true. Almost true. Is that a sensible Hadidorah? There's a Ramban in Kiddushin Daf Lamed Dalet, and when the Ramban says, what are the basic mitzvahs that are Ein Hazman, Groma, and Noshim Chayav Ben? In the list of the Ramban, we have Svias Woimer, which is a big surprise. Because the Moran Rome says Pashtus, Mr. Sheshes Manwa, and why wouldn't it be defined as Mr. Sheshes Manwa? But that's the Ramban. Some Achronim are so surprised because nowhere do we find a source. Nobody quotes this Ramban. So some Achronim argue it's a Tos. At first, I don't want to get into this because it belongs more to the Sugya of Svias Woimer, maybe some other time. But it isn't clear whether that actually is the opinion of the Ramban. I think it is. I think it is. I think it's a mistake, the tendency to try to fix things up when we don't understand and imagine that it's a Tos. One of the Talmidim of the Ramban was Maram Chalav, and he actually quotes the opinion of his Levi that Noshim are Chayav and Svias Woimer. So one cannot say there is no such opinion. But the Moran Rome definitely wasn't aware of such an opinion, because none of the Rishonim read it, which is a surprise. So these Achronim maintain Kibul Olav Choyve is only shaykh when there's a machlokes. So one can take upon himself to be machmer in accordance to the opinion Afar Pisha Lo Nifsaka Halacha Kemoisa Masha Enken Legabe Noshim in Svias Woimer. However, many later Achronim, after the Moran Rome, we find the concept of Kibul Olav Choyve even when there is no opinion that is machmir. Nevertheless, the Achronim do say Kibul Olav Choyve. Chochma Sodom Lagabe Tefillah, whether fingernails, long fingernails, whether they're chatzitza or not, the Chochma Sodom says, even though in accordance to basic halachic definition, it is only when there is dirt or sand or tar under the fingernails that is a chatzitza, but the nail in itself is not a chatzitza. Kiblu Aleim Choyve, that's what the Chochma Sodom argues, and the Chochma Sodom, as you know, is the Chayil, one of the major poskim. Rabbi Kiva Eiger, in the Mafteches and Shmotes, the Chuvas of Kiva Eiger, the very first simon, Chuvas of Kiva Eiger, Rabbi Kiva Eiger argues that Noshim bet Kiyas Shoifar, by basic halacha definition, Kiyas Shoifar is a Mrs. Seishas Mandrona. But women usually are very, very fastidious and very careful about Kiyas Shoifar, and they flock to the shuls, and when they can't come to shul, sometimes there's a baltakea that blows, in houses for Noshim. Where does this come from? And Rabbi Kiva Eiger argues it is Kiblu Aleihem Choyve. There is no opinion that Noshim are Chayav in Svias Woimer or in Kiyas Shoifar. But nevertheless, Rabbi Kiva Eiger, and Rabbi Kiva Eiger was Rabbi Kiva Eiger, one of the greatest of the Achronim, argues that Kiblu Aleihem Choyve. In our days, in Eretz Yisrael,
the Zikorim calls it.
What?
It's the Zikorim, the Chaporim.
Okay. But regardless of the reasoning and the rationale of Kiyas Shoifar, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa, Nobody says Noshim are Chayiv and Kiyah Shoifer because it is a Mitzvah Seshas Mangroma. Your guess is a good guess and a valid guess. Probably it's because of the schus of Kiyah Shoifer, of the kapor of Kiyah Shoifer. But Kiyah Shoifer, which is as good, is valid whether you're there or you're not there. I would guess or suggest we should say that the reason Noshim are so makted in Kiyah Shoifer is because they want to do tshuva. And the Rambam explains Kiyah Shoifer as Uri Yashem Mishiraskim and Ardonam Akitzu Metar Damaskim. Well, we all need to repent and we all need to atone and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. Maybe that is the reason they are so makted in Kiyah Shoifer. But by halachic definition, that is what the Vayigash argues. Kibru Aleim Chayv. And that is the same as Noshim Esvias Oema. There is no opinion, either in the Gemara or in the Rishonim or anywhere, that Noshim are Chayiv in Kiyah Shoifer. And nevertheless, the Vayigash argues, Kibru Aleim Chayv. Well, in most Kehilas, Noshim sat in the Sukkahs, but they weren't makted after the Sukkah. Usually they bench on the Esli, but not always is it a payday every day. So the Vayigash doesn't speak about Esli, Dalad Minim, or Sukkah, but he does speak about Shoifer, and he says Kibru Aleim Chayv. In our days in Eretz Yisrael, Noshim are also very active about Kriyas Parshas Zohar. This is also a halacha which was unknown in the past. In Europe, nowhere did Noshim go to Shiur Kriyas Parshas Zohar. Nowhere. Neither in Hungary, nor in Poland. The Eretz Tzvi writes that he never heard in Poland that Noshim's coming to Shul to hear the Kriyas Parshas Zohar. In our days, in Eretz Yisrael, they're very makbid. I think even if Noshim are mechuyev in Kriyas Zohar, they can do it at home. They don't have to need to come to shul. So Rabbi Yoshev Zatzal felt that maybe it's the gather of Kibru Aleihem Chayv. Which brings us to a question: how exactly does this happen? Do we need a duration of generations? Does it have to be a minute vasikin? How far back does this have to go? If we say Kibru Aleim Chayv is only, if there are some opinions that are mechayev, well, Kriyas Parshas Zohar Noshim is a matter of controversy. On one hand, probably it's a Mitzvah Magron, even though the Chiyuv D'Oraisa has no dog's man. It is only at Konas Chachumen that we read Parashas Zohar once a year in the Shabbos before Sukkot. That is not a din d'oraisa. Sefer HaKenesh is the only one that is showing that deals with discretion directly, and he writes that because Noshim are not b'nei Melchoma, and therefore they also are exempt from the Mitzvah Chiyas. They don't go out to war. They don't engage in battle, and therefore they're also put from Tzchis Masamolek. And the Meches Chinuch argues, so this is a machlokes. So if it is a machlokes, theoretically, Kibru Aleim Chayv should work, but the question is, could we assume that Kibru Aleim Chayv? As I said at the beginning of today's Shia, the last source once again brings us back to Hilchos Chanukah. The Mishnah Berurah, Tofreish Ayin Hey Sif Koden Tes, quotes a Sefer Oilas Shmuel. And sometimes the swarm that the Mishnah Berurah quotes, very interesting. Not always are they very well-known swarm. But the Sif Koden Tes, Mishnah Berurah quotes, Ein Shuvas Oish Shmuel Kufay Deredidan Shemadlikin Kolecho B'fnei Atzma Imakom Mokem Isho Einat Sicha Ladlik. Because Ishtay Kigufoy Baal Keishtay, so even in accordance to the opinions that women do not have to light the candles, in Roitz and Mahalik Mevorchos, they can make a bracha. To me, doesn't make sense. So he says, Noshim do not have the minig of Ner Kolecha V'Yachad. But nevertheless, if they want to make a bracha, they can do so like Mitzvah Seishas Mangrona. It's not like Mitzvah Seishas Mangrona. Mitzvah Seishas Mangrona, she's not Mahuyev, but she could perform. And if she performs, she makes a bracha. If Noshim don't have the din of Ner Kolecha V'Yachad, they are included in Ner Shubeisai. So when the husband lies, they already performed the mitzvah. It is like a woman that would want to say a bracha twice on achilas matzah, or she already ate matzah and then she wants to make a bracha and eat it once again. Because the noshim are exempt from ner kolecha v'yachad, they are included in ner ishbu beisai. So how could she make a bracha?
What if she doesn't want to be able to?
That is another question. If she doesn't want to be Yotze, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, because Ishtaki Gufoi, and it not necessarily works. This Mishnah Berurah contradicts the Mishnah Berurah in Tov Reishai and Zayin Sifot and Tez Zayin. Over there he says, if your wife lit the candles already, you can't make a bracha once again because Ishtaki Gufoi. So if the woman was Maglet, the husband can't make a bracha. And if the husband was Maglet, the woman could make a bracha. Doesn't make sense. So I checked the Oile Shmuel. And the Oile Shmuel says, like the Mishnah Berurah quotes in his name, but he goes even beyond that and he says, well, Noshim make a bracha nevi mitzvah seishas mangrona. Ve'em timtza loimer, it is because kiblu alayim chayva. No. And he brings some sources that Noshim could make a bracha even, and he says, lo kiblu alayim chayva. So first of all, it's a big chiddush to say, kiblu alayim chayva and all the mitzvah seishas mangrona. We do not find that anywhere. But the Esam Chiddush of the Oile Shmuel, to me, it's a big Chiddush. I don't understand it. Because if they do not have Madlikin L'Kolecha V'Yachad, they are included in Esher Esher. So does he mean if the woman wants to light before her husband lights, but then her husband will have a problem because the Mishnah Berurah Paskins and Siman Tov Reishai and Zayin, that if his wife lighted, he can't say a bracha. So there's no way I could understand. If she lights, he can't say a bracha, and if he lights, she could say a bracha. And if he means that she must light before him, first of all, he should say that. He doesn't specify that. And that wouldn't make sense. She should light, and then he wouldn't be able to say the bracha. So, this Oile Shmuel is a big chiddush. But what the Mishnah Berurah doesn't bring in his name is the Havamina. Maybe the fact that Noshim could make a bracha mitzvah sheish mangroma is because kiblu alayim chayva. But this is a major discussion in Taisus. The machlokes is between Rashi and Baalei Taisus, and it has nothing to do with kiblu alayim chayva. The question is whether Asher Kiddushonu v'tzivanu can only be said by one that is machuyev, or even one that's Eina Mitzvah V'Oiseh could say that Tzivonu. Yes?
Would this be only if it was at the same time? Suppose the woman said the brachas and the husband came home 2 hours later, he could not say the brachas then?
Yes, according to the Mishnah Berurah, if the woman lived at home, even if the husband was there and he comes back later, he cannot say a bracha. And that is why my psak is, if you're late to come home, the family should wait. I think that's primarily because of the chinuch aspect and also because of kibud av. So if one of the children were light, the father still could say the bracha when he gets home. But if his wife lights, then he can no longer say the bracha. So that is a chiddush based on the concept of ishtaki gufay, which is different than ner ish, the basic. So just coming back to the basic idea of kibud alayim chayva, it was quite clear in the shir we said today that we're dealing with two different ideas and two different concepts. One is the individual, personal kibud alayim chayva, and the other is the general one. So the individual kibud alayim chayva maybe is based on din and nidorim, like minig shel mitzvah. And minig shel mitzvah becomes obligatory, even though you didn't take it upon yourself b'rosh haneder. But it has a din of a neder, as we find in your day and Hilchos Nedarim. That probably would be the definition of the personal kibbutz of chayva. But the gather akloli of kibbutz of chayva probably is part of what we define as hilchas minhagim. But I do think that in hilchas minhagim there are two different dinim. Minig is binding, and twice in Shas, Psukim Daf Nun and Chulin Daf Tzadik Gimel, because I'll give you the source. How do we know that a person must adhere to minhagim? How do we know that Taryag Mitzvahs isn't enough? That there are additional chuyuvim beyond Taryag Mitzvahs? That minig is binding. As I quoted, the Gemara Chulin Tzadik Gimel and Psukim Daf Nun, Shema B'ni Musa Abuch Ovicho V'alti V'shlosim. The Pasuk in Mishlei, that is the basic source that a person must adhere to minhagim. But I think kibbutz of chayva goes beyond the general halacha of minhagim. Kibbutz of chayva is, there are certain areas in which it is not only a minig, but it is a minig b'toiras chayva. And therefore I think the opinion of the Achronim, Azir Shem Shel Amechas Chanach, makes a lot of sense to me. If there is a machlokes, then it is fair to assume that if the minig is kedasa machmirim, then the way we understand the minig is took upon themselves to be machmir according to the opinions that have the harsher opinion that are machmir. But if it's not a machlokes, then it stays in the realm of minag ba'alma, which is Shema B'ni Musa Avicho V'alti V'shlosim. Kibbutz of chayva is not by every minig. By the vast majority of minhagim, we do not find the concept kibbutz of chayva. And as we saw in today's shiur, the kibbutz of chayva, you have to daven once again, you have to read daven, you could make a bracha. It's not a question of bracha levatala. So this goes beyond the chiyuv of minig. It is a minig b'toras chayva. So how do we differentiate between stam minig, which is based on toras yimecha, and a minig which becomes far beyond the minig kibbutz of chayva? I think it would be fair to argue that when there is a machlokes and the minig is kedasa machmir, our interpretation of the minig would be they took upon themselves to be machmir kedasa machmirim, and that becomes as if halachically binding. And therefore I identify with the opinion of the Achronim that I go against the Magen Avram by Tzvias U'Omer Anoshim or by Tkiyah Shofar Anoshim Rebeki Bey. So this is our second shiur this year in Hilchas Chanukah. What is Chanukah all about? Each and every one of our Yom Tovim has an Neshama Yaseh, has its basic essence. Besides the halachas, what is it all about? So on Pesach we know that you eat matzah, you eat mori, you read dalat choices, but there is Zman Cherusei. And in Rosh Hashanah, you blow the shofar, you say Malchus, but it's all about Malchus and Tshuva. What is Chanukah about? So in the Rambam we find two prokim in Hilchas Chanukah, Perek Gimel Dalet. What about Aleph Beis? Well, probably you all know that the Rambam put together because Megillah v'Chanukah. And while Perek Aleph Beis is Dina Megillah, Perek Gimel Dalet is Dina Chanukah. So in Hilchas Chanukah we have two different prokim. What are these two prokim about? All the dinim of Halal are on first Perek, Perek Gimel. Perek Dalet is dedicated to the dinim of Ner Chanukah. Probably we would have it the other way around, but that is the formulation of the Rambam, which seems to indicate Ner Chanukah is the mitzvah of Chanukah. But what is the essence of Chanukah? Vayigash. Giving thanks and gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is interesting because Perek Gimel Hilchas Chanukah is all the halachas of Halal. Not only the halachas of Halal Shor Chanukah, but all the dinim of Halal. Probably if we would write the Rambam, where would we put Hilchas Halal? Probably in Hilchas Tefillah, in Sefer Halal. After all, it's part of the Seder of Tefillah. No. In Hilchas Tefillah, we do not find Halal. All the halachas of Halal are Perek Gimel in Chanukah. And Perek Gimel comes before Perek Dalet. And there's only in the second Perek that the Rambam writes Hilchas Hanel. And let us just note, in the Tefillah of Alanisim, we do not mention the Nes of Pach Hashem, and we do not mention the Mitzvah of Adlokas Hanel. Kavu Shmoynes Yemei Chanukah Elu Lahoidris Ulaharel B'Shimcho. So Chanukah is all about Halal Voidoi, giving gratitude to our Kodesh Baruch Hu, Alanisim va'alanaflois. That is the mahus of Yemei Chanukah. What do we think about? The Gzeira was Ashkichum Terosacho, Ulahaviram Mechukei Fritzanach. And it is very well known, the interpretation, the explanation of the Lavush. Purim, we have Mishta V'Simcha. Chanukah, no Chiyuv Achila, no Chiyuv V'Shliach. Because the Sakona Chanukah, the Gzeira was Shechachas HaTorah. The salvation was the salvation of the Torah way, or a Torah life, and therefore the Mitzvah we have is Adlokas Hanel. The Avonim desecrated all the Klei HaMikdash. Avonim sheshikzu hayavonim. We have a sugi and a Zohar of Mumbeis. But nevertheless, the Nes was not in the Ketores, not in the Lechem Aponim, but in the Shemen Shemen Samor. Why is that? Because the three Klei HaMikdash, the three basic Klei HaMikdash, Mizbeach, Shulchan, and are connected to Avodah Gemilas Chesed. Chanukah is Torah, Mizbeach is Avodah, and Shulchan obviously is Chesed. The Gzeira was about Torah, the Hatzorah was Torah, and therefore the Nes was in the Meres Hamor. Shemen Zay is Shivim. Usually the Yemei Chanukah, I quote a fascinating Seder Olam, because I strongly identified with this shmuz. What was the first history book written, the basis of? Who would guess? Well, some would say Divrei Hayomim. No, Divrei Hayomim is not actually history. It's part of the Torah Nevi'im, the Ksud. Well, others say Josephus Flavius. He wasn't necessarily Jewish. I'm speaking about ours. The great Tanna of Yossi ben Chalafta was one of Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim, Talmidei Shel Rabbi Akiva. He wrote Seder Olam Rabos. And Seder Olam is quoted twice in Shas Babi, Yevonis Peves and Nidad Memvo. Chazal quote Seder Olam. And when Yosef ben Chalafta comes to the Greek period, there's a fascinating line. He writes, the Greeks had a great king and a great conqueror, and his name was Alexandros Mogdon, Alexander the Great, one of the greatest conquerors in history. He conquered most of Europe, part of Asia. V'hu molach Yud Beishonim, ad kan hayu misnavim beruach hakodesh, makan va'elech hateyozmacho l'shmoya divrei chachamim. Mystery. Ma kesher. What's the shaykhus with the Greeks? The Bir HaGro, the Gro was the only one of the Achronim that covered the entirety of Torah Shebal Peh. However, called Torah Shebal Peh Tachas Shiftoi. The Mishnah, Bali, Yerushalmi, Zohar, and he came to the Seder. And the Gemara on that passage comments, Mishahorbu Yitzra Davodah Zorah Botla HaNevuah. Once again, seems to be a great finish. Ma'akesh. Livi Oimali. I don't have any source to what I say, but I feel it very strongly. Livi Oimali. There's a medrash in Parshas Bereishah. V'choshech al pnei hatohom zu malchus Yovam. V'choshech al pnei hatohom zu malchus Yovam. Chazal speak about the Oragonus, the great light that was created before the sun and the moon, before the Ma'oros. Chazal say that light is something we do not understand. Obviously something supernatural. Benignas, it is concealed. Where was it concealed? The Baal Shem Tov said in the Torah. And that is actually what we find in Tanchum and Parshas Noach and in Zohar Kodesh and Parshas Yisro. Libi Yoimeli Keneged Oragonas, there is also the Choshech of Yemei Bereshis. And that Choshech al Pnei Torah, is not only the lack of light, it is something which is created. And that Choshech is interpreted by Chazal, Zu Malchus Yom. The Greeks that were ones that brought light to the world. Western civilization, Western culture is based on the thinkings, the teachings, the ideas of the ancient Greeks. The Greeks are the one that gave us the prosa and poetry and art and sport and democracy and most of the things that are so precious to Western culture. But Chazal, with their infinite wisdom, say what seems to be light for the entire world to us is a mortal danger. So what is the Mishkan Neged to Malchus Yavan? No longer prophecy. Nevuah was relevant against Yitzhak da Avodah Zorah. Mishahorgo Yitzhak da Avodah Zorah Batla Nevuah. When the Greeks came up on the stage of history with their culture, with their ideas, with their enlightenment, the only tool we have at our disposal is Chachmas HaTorah. Oira Shel Torah Neged Choshech Al Pnei Torah. It is only the Oragonos. It is only the Oragonos that could overcome the Choshech Al Pnei Torah. So Rabbi Yossi ben Chanafta says, when the Greek Empire reached its height, Ad kan hoy misnamen beruach HaKadosh, mekan be'elach hateiras nachol l'shmua divrei chacham. From now on, it is only Chachmas HaTorah. And it is not a coincidence that right after Nes Chanukah, the Nesochan of the Chashmonaim, that was the tremendous period of development of Torah Shabbat. That is when we were zoited to the greatest Tanun, the Zubis, Hillel B'Shamai, the Talmidim of Shemaya V'Avtam, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Eliezer Godel, Rabbi Akiva and his great Talmidim. Those were the 200 years from Nes Chanukah to the end of Vayigash. Ad kan hoy misnaven beruach hakodesh makan v'yelach hateiras nachol l'shmoya divrei chacham. So there is a lot of discussion why we don't find the dinam of Chanukah in Mishnah. Chanukah is mentioned more than once in Mishnayos. Masechet Bekurim, Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Masechet Bava Kama, but none of the halachos of Chanukah are in the Mishnah. So there's a very well-known Chassam Sofer and others. There's a lot of controversy and discussion about it. I personally don't think it's such a great kasha. Shishas in the Mishnah is not a systematic work as we would expect in modern teaching or knowledge. Nobody wrote a very systematic work. Shishas in the Mishnah has great omissions. Neither are the halachos of Tfilim or Tzitzis or Mezuzah in the Mishnah. So maybe it's not such a great wonder why Chanukah is in the Mishnah. Neither are Dini Sefer Torah in the Mishnah. Tefillin and tzitzis are essential. They are the basics of Seder Hayom, and they aren't in the Mishnah either. But nevertheless, it's an interesting question. So my feeling would be, maybe Chanukah is not in the Mishnah because it belongs in the Gemara. Sefer HaRekech says, Lamed Vov Neiros of Chanukah, Mahadran, light 36 Neiros, coincides with 36 hours that Odom Rishon was nana from the Oragonas. Because the Oragonas, Nitnutzetz ben Chanukah, and the Oragonas is in Torah. One of the great disciples of the Baal Shem Tov was the Pinchas Mekoritz. And the Pinchas Mekoritz says that 36 Neiros Chanukah coincide with another Lamed Vav. What else is Lamed Vav? whenever I ask this question, people say, Lamed Vav Tzadikim. Maybe, didn't think about that. What else do we have Lamed Vav? Lamed Vav Mesechtes and Shas Bab. The Pinchas Kolatza says that's Keneged Lamed Vav and Eretz. So, I think we're almost up to Kachuk by now. Lamed Vav Neres Chanukah, 36 hours of the Aragonas coincide with Lamed Vav Mesechtes. But in Mishnayos there are 60 Mesechtes. 60 in Mishnayos, but only 36 in Shas Bab. So maybe the reason why Chanukah is not in the Mishnah because of Eino HaKodesh, Beruach Tadshoy understood that Chanukah belongs to Simchas HaTorah, to Chedves HaDeshmaitza, to Ora Torah. Ora Torah, that reached its height and its magnificent development in the Talmud, beyond the Mishnah. So the Oros of Chanukah, Be'ikar, are in the Gemara, and that's why they're not found in the Mishnah. So these days should be days of a renewed commitment to devotion in Talmud Torah, Simchas HaTorah, Chedves HaDeshmaitza, and we should be Zocher to the Aragonas. The Zohar says the Aragonas was concealed in Torah. And wherever someone is Omer B'Torah, Isman Deloim B'Yorais, a beacon of light, shines from the Aragonas and rests upon him. And he is Zocher to the Lichtigkeit, to the light of the Aragonas. And that is the Kiyum of the world. Mi Yitim V'Yech Elkeinu Amoim, we should be Zocher to the light of the ocean, Ninas B'Torah. We should be Zocher to see the Aragonas B'Idgalia. We should all be Zocher to see the Kohen God. Meitu v'malek es haneres, b'menorah Moshe, b'beis hamikdash, b'bias goyel tzedek,